Howdy, folks. Welcome to the Hunting Stories Podcast. I'm Michael, and today we're going to hear some stories from John McCormick, otherwise known as Redbeard Outdoors. John is a super passionate outdoorsman, and he's actually an influencer and has a great podcast of his own. I've actually put a link to his show in the show notes, so make sure you check him out. But this is a fun episode because we get to hear how hunting literally changed the course of John's life. He nearly moved from out west in Utah back to the East Coast, but a good friend changed everything by inviting him on his first Western big game hunt. Either way, I want to thank John for coming on, and now let's let him tell his story. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Hunting Stories Podcast. Today we have John McCormick on the call, otherwise known as Redbeard Outdoors. So, John, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, so my name's Jonathan McCormick, or it's starting to stick, the Redbeard, right? Redbeard Outdoors on Instagram. I've got my own podcast as well, but Redbeard. It kind of started sticking with the elk-shaped camp that I went to 2 years ago now, and just kind of rolled with it because now I can't shave, right? Because
Ever again.
it's kind of my brand now. So, and my wife's okay with that, so we'll stick with that. But
You're like the Tom Selleck of the hunting industry.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but and funny story about that too. And I don't know when this is going to come out, but I actually I was trimming up my beard, and we're not on camera here, so you can't see this, but I nicked my beard with my trimmer, and I kind of keep it short on the sides anyway, and so but it went a little too short. And so, so I walked around for a day, and my kid said it. He came up to me, and he has no filter. He's 7, but even more than a normal 7-year-old, he has no filter. And so he came up to me. He looked at the side of my face. He looked at the other side, and he was like, "Dad, are you balding?"
Oh, no.
I said, "I'm balding on top because of you kids," but no, that was me. That was my trimming mistake. So I've had to touch it up a little bit, and it's a little bit shorter on the sides now, just so it'll blend a little bit better. But yeah, if anyone sees me between now and probably a week from now, that's why it's short on the sides, because I screwed up. I still do that.
Funny. We've all done it. And then you just sort of start to try and fix it, and all of a sudden you've got a much shorter beard than you intended. Yeah. I've done that exact thing. My wife told me I'm not allowed to do it anymore. So she likes the beard, apparently. So
yeah. And my wife actually told me, and I'm documenting it here too. I'm trying to document it in all the places I can. I told my best friend, I texted him the moment that she said it, and I kind of jokingly, just in passing, I was like, "I'm going to shave my head and then grow my beard out for elk season, and I'm going to braid it like a Viking." And she's like, "Do it." And I was like, "Okay." So we're going to see if I actually follow through with that, because I'm kind of wondering what my head looks like. I wear hats all the time anyway, so it probably won't matter too much, but yeah, that'll be interesting. So, as far as who I am, oh man, I don't even know where to start, man. I'm born and raised North Carolina. So I'm a Southern boy through and through. I still say sir and ma'am and y'all, and got the manners of opening the door even when I get nasty looks, like, women can open the doors for themselves. Yes, I know that, but that's what I do. And so I was born and raised a Southern gentleman, grew up fishing. I never really was into hunting out east, even though my grandpa, I guess he was my great grandpa, had the foresight to buy me a lifetime hunting and fishing license when I was born. And I'm very grateful for that. So I never really went hunting though, because I didn't have a family that was really into bow hunting, and I didn't like the idea of sitting in an elevated stand with a rifle or a shotgun with a slug, and just kind of having shooting lanes. I didn't like that. I was like, if I want to go target shooting, I go target shooting. I have enough respect for animals, and this is my own personal view. Everyone take it for what it's worth. I know it's okay to go shoot a deer with a rifle from a stand, but for me, it didn't feel right. And so I stuck mainly to fishing out east. And again, born and raised until I was 18. I was in North Carolina. Then I came out to Utah and went to BYU for a year, typical LDS Mormon kid. And then I went down and served a mission for 2 years down in Mexico. And that's a whole nother story, has nothing to do with hunting, but I loved serving the people down in Mexico, and it humbled me a lot because it made me realize how blessed I am to have the things I have here in our country, namely air conditioning, hardwood floors, or or carpet. Being able to have carpet, running cars that aren't smelling like gasoline all the time and breaking down, like
Yeah.
just so many things. Not having to worry about getting Moctezuma's revenge. All of that stuff that we have here in the States is just, it's a blessing, and all the freedoms we have and things like that. So I came back and I ended up meeting my wife here while I was going to college, and we got married. She's from Utah, and I, being again from the East Coast, and if anyone's been on the East Coast versus Utah, it's a drastically different climate. And so I wanted to go back to the greenery, the humidity, all those wonderful things that are out east, until I had a friend that, and I probably should have kept the date better, but it's about 6-7 years ago. That was about 6 years ago, that he invited me to go on a hunt with him. And that changed kind of my course, because I was getting ready to move back. And I was getting ready to move back east. And so I went out with him and said, sure, whatever.
What were you hunting?
So he, at the time, I don't know how he does it, but he's like the luckiest dude I know. He's always got some kind of tag in his pocket, whether it be mountain lion, deer, elk.
Yeah.
This last year he had a moose tag. That was a cow moose, but still he had a moose tag, bear
That's
tags.
awesome.
Like he's been hunting since he ever could. And even before he could, he was out hunting with his family, just following along. So he took me out. We were hunting deer, and I didn't even have binoculars, right? So I just kind of went up on this mountain, and I'm like panting and like dead. But the competitive side of me wouldn't let him beat me, right? So, I mean, he raced up the mountain like nothing, and I wouldn't let the mountain beat me. So I get up there. He had let me borrow a pair of binoculars. And so we were out looking for deer. And slowly, just from that time forward, every time that I saw a deer, I got better at spotting what you spot. Like now, it's kind of even hard to explain to people that are new at spotting animals. But the particular things that you look for in animals against the mountainside, hillside, trees, whatever you're looking for, the paths, like he used to look at things and say, "Oh, that's a deer trail." I'm like, "How the frick do you know that's a deer trail?" Right?
Yeah.
Just stuff like that. You can't even, like, I can't remember thinking that, like what I was seeing personally, but now my eyes are trained to be able to see that, and I'm like, "Oh, that's definitely this, and this is that." But so that's kind of where I got started. I got hooked, and I've stayed out west, and I've fallen in love with the mountains. Got into backpacking. Realized that with mountain biking, I have terrible balance. My feet deserve to be
Ugh.
on the ground. I am awful. I fell so many times.
I think everyone that mountain bikes
Yeah.
takes crashes. Like I had a buddy he said he was good at it, but he'd come back from work or from every weekend to work, and he would just be beat up. I think that's just the way that game is played.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I've had some really bad gashes and stuff from, he's like flying again. He's been doing this for years, and he's taking me down this trail. He's like, "Oh, this is a super easy one." I'm like, "Awesome. I'm looking forward to it." And, and anyway, I get totally beat up, skinned up and everything. And I talked to someone else about the trail, and they were like, "Dude, that's like the equivalent of a black diamond for skiing."
And this is the
And I was
same
like,
guy that takes you on the deer hunts as takes you on the mountain
yes,
biking.
yeah. So he's known as he hit on his gravestone. It'll probably say like on to the next ridge. Like he doesn't sit still for nothing. Like he'll glass,
Yeah,
and if he doesn't see anything, he's on to the next one. And that's just how he is. And Brent's an awesome
yeah.
guy. But so he got me into hunting, and then what really got me hooked was, so I put in my first year for deer. And granted, I didn't even have a hunting rifle. I had some pistols, concealed carry, stuff like that, but I didn't have a rifle, so it was okay that I didn't draw the first year. And I went out with him again, and he had a deer tag and an elk tag, and I can't remember the exact time of year, but either way, it kind of overlapped. I think he had an archery deer tag and a rifle elk tag or something along those lines. Either way, he was carrying both weapons, and that's always funny to see. But we were out there spotting, and I'm like, man, there's this like that just looks like an off color brown over there. Maybe it's a rock, but put your spotter on it. And so he put the spotter on it, and it's probably a mile away or so. And sure enough, there was this bull elk bedded. This was at like 9 a.m. And so like the sun was already beating on him. I don't know what was wrong with him. I think he was just tired from the rut. He might have been beaten up or something, but
Hmm.
there were no other elk up there. And it was super early in the season for them to be down that far. Usually they come down into this particular area after it snowed, and they hang out there during the late season. But anyway, he was all by himself, and he was like, "Man, we're gonna make a play on this guy." And I'd never seen an elk in person before. And so we get up to within 350 yards, and the elk is still bedded. And by now it was like 10 o'clock. And I'm like, I'm sitting here, I'm like, is he dead? Like what? Like why is he still sleeping? Like he shouldn't still be bedded. And and so I stay up a little bit higher. He creeps down to about 300 yards, and I stay up higher, and I've got my binoculars on him. And then I hear the shot ring out, and I see him stand up, and then he puts another shot in him, and he just falls. So it was like perfect scenario. But again, we're in this bad habit of we don't think about where the animal is.
Yeah.
We're
Until
just
after it's
like,
down.
yeah, we're just like, oh, we're gonna pack it out no matter what. Like we're just got that mindset, and we're completely capable. We just didn't realize how crappy of a spot he was in. So we go straight down this draw and straight up the other side, rather than what would have been smarter would be to go up and around. We went straight through this oak brush, or scrub oak. If anyone
Ugh.
knows about scrub oak,
Yeah.
oh man, we came out of there looking like we had come out of a bear attack. And so we get to the elk, and I was just mesmerized. And this is where, like, I still hadn't even heard no bugle.
How long
But
ago was this? When was this hunt?
oh, I'd have to look. I'm terrible with dates, except for my anniversary. No, I'm good with that one. I learned that one. I want to say it was 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay.
So I was just barely a year into going on hunts with him. And mule deer were cool, right? And I had been used to whitetail, so they're bigger and they're awesome animals. But I walked up on this elk, and I was like, holy crap. And he was at an awkward spot, very steep area. So it took us a lot longer than it should have to clean. And I had never cleaned an animal before. So that's kind of a big undertaking for the first time cleaning an animal, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
but we got it done. We packed it out, and everyone was exhausted by the time we got out of there. They were all cursing us for shooting this elk in the spot, but he had some awesome family members that came up and helped, so we could get it all out in one shot. I think we had like 5 guys,
Wow.
and I thought this
Those
thing
are
was
good
huge.
friends.
Now, oh yeah, he had 2 brothers and then a couple of other good friends that came up. And I'm over here like, I don't want to screw anything up, and like I just kept asking questions. I probably gummed up the process a lot more than helping, because we had so many knives going after this thing at one time. I was like, I'm just gonna back off and watch, because I didn't want to get stabbed, and I didn't want to cut up his meat wrong. So anyway, we get the meat out, and I'm realizing now I'm looking at the pictures now, it was a 5-point, but it wasn't one of those raghorn 5-points. Like this guy was a solid 5-point, right?
Yeah.
But obviously he wasn't a 6 or a 7. He wasn't as big as some elk that I've seen now, but that got me. I mean, that the talons of hunting the outdoors out here out west, and even more so elk. And again, I still hadn't even heard a bugle yet. It just like got into me. And
Yeah.
so and I would say that's probably the most defining moment of my hunting out west and getting into the outdoors out west, and more specifically just thinking that elk are the most majestic creatures out west, was probably that moment. And so I'm forever grateful that he was willing to wait for me as I struggle up the mountain, in this first year trying to get my mountain legs and conditioning and all that.
Yeah, it says
And
something pretty special about hunting, that like you had this moment, this like life altering moment, and you weren't even the one hunting. You were just coming along and sharing the experiences. It's pretty cool.
yeah, exactly. And that's why I always recommend to people, find a good mentor, because that's priceless. Like trying to go out, I would be, if it wasn't for Brent, we would have moved back east. Like I can say that without a shadow of a doubt. I'd be back in North Carolina. Probably wouldn't be as fit as I am, and definitely wouldn't have the desire to hunt elk and mule deer and everything else I want to hunt. I'd probably just be back to fishing and kind of the East Coast life, which is a
Yeah.
lot more sedentary than it is out here. So I'm forever grateful for that. That's not only just changed my path as far as hunting, but my entire life. The fact that he was willing to invite me. Now he didn't do the work for me, obviously, right?
Have you told him how he's changed your life, or is this something that you've been thinking about but never really expressed to him?
Oh no, I've told him a million times over. Oh, for
He's
sure.
like,
Yeah.
"Stop it, John. I get it. Leave me alone."
Yeah. Well, and he reiterates to me, like, he's like, yeah, well, I've done that same thing with quite a few people. He was like, but there's only been one or two people, and he was like, you're one of them. You're the one that stands out the most, he says, because you put in the work, you went out and you did your own research, you learned how to apply for tags, you got your gear set up, and he was like, now you're the one that we go to when we have gear questions, whether
Yeah.
it be about archery or bags or packing, stoves, whatever. Like he's like, you're the one that is all about that now, and you've kind of reignited that passion in the brothers that they have to get out as much as they do now. And so I hope I've contributed value to their lives just as much as he's contributed value to my life. And that's kind of how I look at things too, that value exchange.
Yeah.
He's given me so much, I want to give some back. And so
Yeah. Sounds like you're returning the favor for sure.
oh yeah, yeah, we're definitely. And so that would be probably my biggest hunting story. And then I've got one this year. So going back to elk, I got into archery in 2020.
Mhm.
I picked up a bow, and this was technically the end of 2019, but picked up my first bow, and I told myself I wasn't going to go after an animal until a big game animal. I went after turkeys, but I wouldn't go after elk and deer until I had shot my bow every single day that I possibly could. Obviously, if I was traveling somewhere without my bow, that's a different story. But if I could physically have my bow there, I would shoot at least one arrow every day for a full year before I would go after a big game animal. And so that was just something that I told myself. I didn't tell anyone else. And then in 2021, so last year, I actually had an archery tag in my pocket. And we went out multiple times. I went out with Clint. You've recorded with Clint. He's an awesome dude.
Yeah.
Went out with him and a buddy of ours, Lyle, that he introduced me to. And Lyle, oh my gosh, Lyle is such an amazing guy as well. And that's a story for a different day. But we went out and we had many encounters with elk. I think they had a few more than me because I bounced between being with them and with Brent. And then the late season rolled around. So here in Utah, you can go out for late season elk, and you can, if you've got the over the counter tag. Late season archery in Utah is not necessarily fun. It's definitely not easy because you've definitely got 2 feet of snow that you're trudging through up these steep mountains where the elk hang out. But
Mhm.
I went out in, oh man, I want to say it was December, just near the end of the late season, and I spotted this group of probably 40 cows. And then off on this other mountainside, I saw 3 or 4 bulls, but they had gone into some thick stuff and they were moving pretty fast. I wasn't going to catch up to them. They were like 3 miles off. There was no way I was going to catch up to them. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go for the cows. And this is an NE6 tag. So, I was like, there's no one else at this trail. Well, there's one other truck, but there's no way that guy's going to make it up to these elk. And he probably didn't see him. So he's probably either going for deer or he's just out for hike. So anyway, I make this trek up, and it's about 2 miles up this mountain, and they were still bedded. And I had taken a picture from the bottom before I started, and used that picture as reference so that when I would get up closer to the elk, I could see the different land markings and things like that. Not just using Onyx, but also the picture that I had, so I would have that reference as to what I was looking at.
Smart.
Well, I get up there and, I've been trudging through the snow. It's about, at some points it was knee deep. And other points it wasn't so bad, but yeah, those knee deep snow going uphill, get up to within where I think it's going to be about 150, 200 yards of these elk. And I peek over and they're only 100 yards away and they're still bedded. And I'm like, okay. And I'm sitting here, I'm looking at my watch. I'm like, okay, They've still got probably another hour before they get up. We're going to be good to go. This is the perfect scenario. The snow was fresh, so it wasn't crunchy. It was pillowy soft. And the wind was in my face, and they couldn't see me. I had enough cover that they couldn't see my movement. And again, they were all asleep. So everything was in my favor. I was like, I'm going to take my time. And I kind of crept into 80 yards and found a good spot to kind of hang out and wait for them to get up and move a little bit. And I'm ranging, and then I see one of them kind of perk up. And again, this is about an hour and a half, 2 hours in. I've busted my tail getting up the mountain. I'm like, oh no, like, what did I do wrong? I checked the wind again. It's still blowing in my face. Like, I haven't moved. They didn't see me. I'm like, what the heck? So she just like jumps up and then she barks. And if anyone's ever heard that elk bark, have you heard the bark of an elk before?
I have, yep.
Okay. It sucks.
So, yeah.
It's one of the most depressing sounds you will ever hear. And so I heard that, and then they all jump up. There's about 40 of them. And I'm like, what is going on? And in my head, I'm like, okay, before I came up here, I told myself I'm not shooting over 70 yards. I'm fully capable of it, but I'm not going to. I owe it to the animal to get in closer. This is why I did archery. Like, talking myself out of taking this, it ended up, it was like an 85, 90 yard shot. And I was like, I'm not going to do it. Even if they run away, I'm just going to chill here and see what the heck's going on. And in that moment, I hear a bow go off.
Oh, no.
And I was like, what the frick? And anyway, he missed. And so they bolt. And at first I was like, maybe he hit it. I didn't hear the thwack, but maybe he hit it. And if he did, like, I'm going to help him pack it out. And maybe I could talk him out of, like, some meat or something like that. And so anyway, he gets up, I see him, and he was between me and the cows. So they had picked up on him. And the problem, it's good that I didn't take that shot because he was directly in my line of that arrow. So that could have ended really poorly. So he missed, but not only did he miss, he proceeds to call his girlfriend and walk towards the elk. Now they've bolted, but they calmed down and they were like starting to feed again. And then he stands up and calls his girlfriend on the top of this mountain and starts walking towards the elk, talking just like you and me right now.
How far is he from you? I know that you're about, you say 100 yards, 70 yards from the elk when he initially shot. Where was he in between you two?
Yeah, so he was probably 40 yards away from the elk.
From the elk? Okay, so about 30 from you. Got it.
Yeah, so they had bolted to about 300 yards away at this point.
Okay.
But it's still, within earshot and definitely within eye shot. And I'm just watching them starting to calm down a little bit because they didn't know what the heck was going on, right? They just heard the bow go off and they'll calm down eventually. And so I'm sitting here thinking, like, let's just hunker down. They're going to calm down. We can go around the backside of the mountain and come up over top of them. The wind will still be in our face. Like, I'm like planning out all these scenarios. And this dude calls his girlfriend. Yeah, babe. Like, not quiet at all. Yeah, babe, I just missed this elk and they're sitting right here and I'm going to go walk over there and see if I can make it. I'm like, are you kidding me? And at this point, I'm just like cursing him out in my head and like trying to wave him down. Like, what are you doing? Anyway, they end up cresting over and going on the backside of the mountain. And at that point, I catch up to him. And turns out this guy was from Minnesota. And I was like, what are you doing from Minnesota coming during the hardest part of the season to go after elk? And he was like, well, I couldn't go during the regular season because I hadn't got my 6 months of residency. So this is, when I could go.
Oh, so he just moved to Utah from
Minnesota. He had just moved to Utah. And so, we started talking a little bit. I'm like, I bet you they're bedded down on that other side of the hill. Like, they couldn't have run that far. And they're wanting to sleep right now, dude. So we end up going up and we crest over, and somehow these elk had got, like, I don't know how they got to this spot. They had to have had some sort of like ice picks in their hooves or something like that. There was no way we were making it over there. And so we watched them for a little bit. The wind picked up. It got nasty. It started to kind of blizzard a little bit, and they tucked into these trees. And so we ended up walking back down. He ends up being a cool dude. I still talk to him. and hopefully we'll go hunting this year together. But we were just laughing. I was like, dude, what were you thinking? He was like, man, I don't know. I've never seen elk before. And, and so, in his head, he's like, nah, it's all right. Like, they're spooked. They're going to be gone, like in his head. And so I just told him, I was like, dude, congratulations for the first time ever hunting elk. You got within 40 yards. Like, that is an accomplishment in and of itself. So anyway,
Absolutely.
I ended up with a good friend out of that, but that's probably my other biggest that is fresh on my mind because it still stings a little bit because I'm like that close to success.
I have a story that you actually made me think of, and I'll go ahead and tell it. When
Yeah.
you talked about the cow barking, it
Oh
was
yeah.
2020 September archery, and in Colorado we got a freak snowstorm the first week of September, like 10 to 12 inches where we were, which is funny because 2 days earlier it was 90 degrees. It's crazy. Either way, the day after the snowstorm, we're glassing this hillside and we see an elk. My buddy and I just run after it. We're like, it's not going to get away. We're going to follow its tracks. Like we're going to find this elk. So we're following these trails all morning, and the elk didn't bed down. Eventually, we spook another elk, probably about 70 yards. Not the one that we were following, just another monster bull, and it just runs off. And my buddy's like, "Oh, we're gonna chase down. We're gonna chase it down." I'm like, no, we're not gonna chase down an elk. Like it's gone. But at the same time, our buddy had messaged us and said that he found a herd about 2 ridge lines over, and they'd been sitting there for a few hours. So we're like, let's go over there and see if that herd's still there because he's on a different mountaintop. It would take him forever to get there. So we head over there and we see it's probably 30 elk, a couple bulls, a couple spikes, a couple cows, all just bedded in the sunshine, probably just trying to stay warm because of it's a pretty cold day after that snowstorm. So we go down and we're on the other side of the saddle from these elk, and I'm like, all right, here's the deal. We're gonna drop down to the bottom, and then you give me half an hour to get up on top of that mountain. I'll drop in from behind them, and then you come in side mountain. And he's like, all right, that's the plan. So I get up to the top of that mountain, and I'm just sort of walking. The wind's perfect, perfect crosswind. I think they're in front of me, and all of a sudden I see an antler. And it's warm enough. The snow's melting, but it's still a pretty cold day, so the snow's super quiet. I drop my bag. I drop everything but my bow, and I have plenty of cover, probably up to about 20 yards. So I'm just slowly working my way through this cover to this bull. The only problem is the bull's bedded, and it's got a log right in front of its entire body. So all I see is its head and its antlers. And I can
Oh man.
see similarly just down the hill, I see like 3 spikes and a couple cows. And I'm like, all right, well, I'll just hang tight. I think I got to about 45 yards. And I'm like, I feel pretty comfortable here. I just need this elk to stand up. Next thing I know, all of the elk stand up. And all of the elk look in the direction that I know my buddy's in. And then all of a sudden I hear that bark. And they all just book it and they'll just run the opposite direction.
Oh no.
Turns out my buddy didn't have a wind checker. So when he got to a point where he ran out of cover, he's like, yeah, I'll just crawl. So he started crawling and he spooked the entire herd. So I had been sitting there for probably 5 to 10 minutes just waiting for my opportunity when all of a sudden everything started happening. And I was like, at first, all the eyes were looking downhill away from me. So it's the
Yeah.
perfect scenario. There's no reason I wasn't going to harvest a bull. And then the entire herd just ran away.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
awful,
Yeah.
dude.
So those barks are never good news. Not fun.
Yeah, no, they're and the first time I heard it, I thought it was a dog. Like it weirded me out. I don't know. I mean, I know we've been going for a minute here, but I had one more just pop into my mind if you're all right with it.
Yeah, no, keep going, man.
Cool. Sweet. So, if you guys will realize here, all of these have to do with elk. I'm not as obsessed about elk, probably because I haven't been in the game as long as Dan from Elk Shape. He is like in love with elk, right?
Yeah.
Um, I can imagine when I hit his age, I will be too. But at this point, like I feel pretty obsessed. Like I'm constantly thinking about it. Anyway, so I was out with Clint and Lyle, and we had split up this day, and kind of there was, man, the morning. I had never been in a bugle fest like this. There were, I want to say, 4 or 5 different bulls going off, and it was funny because they all have distinct bugles, and I had never heard this before. Like, you look it up online, they all kind of sound the same. But these guys, like, we were naming them because they all, like, one of them just had this Weasley high pitch bugle. The other one only chuckled. Another one had this deep, like, chest rattling, like you could tell he was the boss kind of
Yeah.
bugle. It was amazing. And so anyway, we go up. They kind of got blown out by these other hunters, and I'll try not to stay too negative. So I've already told a bad story, so I'll tell this good story here. And so we come up later and to do the evening hunt in this other area where we know they had gone to, and so Clint and I go up on the left side of the bowl. Lyle went up on the right, and Clint and I split off. We tell each other where we're gonna be, and and so I go up and I sit down and it's like, I want to say it was like 2 or 3 in the afternoon. We wanted to get up there super early before the thermal switch and everything, and just kind of be able to be at a good vantage point. I sat down and I got comfortable. And if any of y'all know about this, you have a snack, you get comfortable, it's a little warm, you fall asleep, right?
Yep.
And this
I've
was
done it.
again 2 or 3 in the afternoon, and so I wasn't too concerned about missing any opportunities. Well, I woke up to the sound of sniffing, and I was like, "What the frick?"
God.
And like it was like right in my ear, and I was like, "What the heck?" And I turned around, and there's a doe literally 5 feet away from me. She probably thinks I smell like a dead animal because at this point it had been like a week since I had showered. But she's like sniffing the crap out of me, dude. And so I turn around, and I've got a GoPro on my head, and I get my phone out as well. And she jumps back about 10 feet, but she still stayed there. And then another doe comes out, and they like circled me for like 10 minutes, and they got super close. And I thought that was awesome. I was like, okay, this is the sign, right? Tonight is the night. This was the very last night of the hunt here in Utah. We were down to the wire. None of us had filled our tags, and well, at least the September hunt. That was the late season after that. But um, anyway, so yeah, I was like, this is a good sign. And so I'm sitting there. The does finally walk off. They weren't spooked for some reason. Again, probably because I smelled like a dead animal rather than a human at that point. But anyway, they walk off, and then I see some brown through the trees, and I'm like, oh, here we go. It's about prime time. And then I see orange.
Oh.
And I was like, like I had an arrow knocked, I had my release on, and I was getting ready to draw back. Like through the trees, it looked like an animal. And
Yeah.
so
You're just
anyway, they
waiting on
come through.
confirmation.
Yeah, right. Yeah. That's why you always confirm, don't shoot through the trees, guys. Don't be stupid. And so anyway, they come up, and it was a youth hunter, and I forgot that. So this was the scary thing. I don't know why Utah did it this year. I know Colorado has issues with overlapping seasons, but there was youth rifle season for elk was the same. Like they started like the last 3 days of our archery season.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
It was a weird thing that happened this last year, and I don't know if this year it's going to happen again. I sure hope not, because that just freaks me out thinking like a 16-year-old has a high powered rifle and might think I'm an elk
Yeah.
because I'm out there in camo. But anyway, so I go up and I talk to him. I was kind of pissed because they had kind of busted out my spot. They were being super loud, and they were like, "Yeah, honestly, we probably wouldn't even pack something out of here. It's so nasty up here." I'm like, "Then get out of my spot!" Like, like, why did you come up here then if you're not going to pack the animal out?
Yeah,
So anyway,
you're just hiking. You're not hunting.
right, exactly. And anyway, so but courteous, you show a little bit of courtesy there, and then I go off to another spot. I'm coming down the steep side of the mountain, and I sit because I know like there's sign everywhere, but these elk had shut up because they were busted from this morning. After that bugle fest, we had some other hunters come in and bust them out, and so I'm sitting there, and you hear the squirrels throwing things, you get excited, you think it's elk, all that stuff's going through my head. Well, I was sitting there, and it was, you can shoot up to 30 minutes after light, after
Sunset.
official sunset. There we go. That's the word I was looking for. So, I've got my watch, I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh, and like in my head, I'm like, sit in this spot until you can't shoot anymore. And I was like, no, like I'd kind of gotten beaten down, and I was kind of talking to myself like, no, I'm okay to go at sunset. Like I'll finish the walk out at sunset.
Yeah.
I got this kind of urge again, like sit here until shooter's light is done. And I'm like, no, like these elk haven't chimed up at all. Like they're not in here anymore. And just before that too, no joke, there were hunters that came down the draw, crash. I swear they were trying to kick and break every single thing that they could. And they were talking again loud. I don't know what's going through the mind of these people, but anyway, so that had happened like an hour earlier. I was like, there's no elk in here. There's no way. And so I talked myself out of it. I went down right at sunset, at official sunset time. I get down, I cross the bottom of the draw, and I'm on the other side going through all this nasty deadfall. And I hear something like 70 yards across the draw up on that hillside where I was sitting. And I'm like, that's just another hunter. And I look back, big brown body. And I'm like, are you really? And so I get my Ranger up, and it was 60 yards. But it wasn't a good shot. I could tell there were antlers. I couldn't tell how big. But I ran back to try and get a spot, because at this point, again, this is like 20 minutes now before shooters lights up. So I'm like, Hail Mary, I'm throwing everything at it. There's no way this elk can get out of this nasty stuff quickly. I'm going to go close the gap to 50 and wait for a spot where there's an opening where I can shoot. And so I run back, and he walks, no joke, 10 yards in front of where I was just sitting.
Oh. If you had
10
just
yards.
sat there a little longer.
Yeah, and so I'm sitting there, but he stopped where I could see his head, I could see his antlers. And he was a big 5x5. He wasn't a little raghorn. He was a big, solid 5x5. Probably should have been a 6x6, but he just didn't get his right vitamins that year. I don't know, but
Yeah.
His body was covered up by a tree.
Oh.
And then he had seen me running, so he had stopped right there, and he turned around and he booked it up the hill, and there was no shot for me. So I'm kind of kicking myself there. Well, I get back into cell phone range, and after I'd kind of run through all the scenarios and said, "Why were you so stupid? Why didn't you sit there? Literally would have had a 10-yard shot. Like, he would have walked out broadside right in front of me." And then I call my wife. Kind of, of course, my wife's very supportive, but she's probably sitting there thinking in your head, like, really, like, you're upset about this, like, not accomplishing shooting an animal, like, what the heck? But she's loving and supporting. She hears me out, and she's like, what's really funny? She said, about that time that you were getting those urges to sit there, we were praying that you would have success.
That's crazy, man.
If that didn't put that nail in the coffin for me, I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And so, any of you guys out there listening that are people of faith, like, the fact that my family was back home praying for me to be successful, and then I chose not to listen to that. You can call it whatever you want. Ever since then, I was bound and determined not to not listen to any of those promptings. Because it may seem silly to people out there, but being a man of faith, a Christian, I firmly believe that God will put things in your path that either, in this case, it was a lesson for me to learn. Hey, you need to listen up, quit being a knucklehead. But listen to those promptings, because that will definitely, and I'm still getting chills right now just talking about it. They can change your life
absolutely
for better.
And they say follow your gut, right? And
yeah,
it could be that it's more than just your gut.
Exactly.
I'm not going to tell anyone what they're feeling, but that's a cool story. That's great, man. Well, this is fun. Any other stories that you want to dive into, or you think you're good for now?
Those are probably my favorite ones. I could talk for days, to be honest with you, but those are probably my favorite ones.
Well, we'll save some for another time then. Did you draw anything this year? Didn't the draw happen about a week ago?
Yeah, so I drew an archery buck tag. So last year I had an archery doe tag and a muzzleloader buck. And so this year I'm going to be able to get a buck with a bow, and then I'm just going to do the over-the-counter normal Utah tag. I didn't draw anything fancy, but it's probably good because I've got a buddy that drew in Wyoming. I've got a buddy that drew a Montana tag, and that same buddy that drew the Montana tag. So not only is he having a baby in the summer, drew in Montana, and he drew his Utah bison tag.
Of course he did.
Yeah, I'm like, dude, like you're like, and his wife is amazing, and she's gonna totally support it,
or has to be.
Yeah, right, exactly. And he just barely moved up closer to us, so I'm excited to go out and start shooting with him. But my buddies will probably need my back and legs. So it's good that because now I can cash in next year when I draw my big tags. I can be like, hey guys, you want to come with me now?
Yeah. Remember that time? Yeah.
Yep.
All right, man. Well, why don't you tell the people where they can find you? We'll go ahead and wrap up and give them. I know you've got plenty of different social places. Let us know what they are.
Yeah, so my main places are, my podcast, Redbeard Outdoors, on all the platforms. You want to go look them up. I'm also on YouTube. I just barely started that because I've started to do some gear reviews. I've got some awesome companies that I'm working with, so you can go check me out. Redbeard Outdoors, same symbol. I've had some people subscribe to another guy that's Redbeard Outdoors. It's not me. If it's not the symbol, that's the same as my Instagram and my podcast. So.
That's
And then
funny.
on Instagram, it's just red.beard.outdoors. Those are my main places that I'm active. And then also, if you guys want to join my community, I've got a little Facebook community until I build an actual website. That's Redbeard's Fit Crew. No, you don't have to have a red beard, and no, you don't have to be fit. You just have to want to be more fit than you are now, and love the outdoors to get into that group. So that's on Facebook.
Well, thank you very much, man. I really appreciate you taking your time and telling us your stories. You've definitely got some good ones, especially considering, like me, you haven't been hunting all that long.
Yeah.
Which just says something about the pastime that we have. Is it lends itself to great experiences. So I appreciate your time. Thank you very much, man. And I'm sure we'll have you back on in the future once you have a few more stories about packing out all your friends' meat.
Definitely, man. Definitely.
All right. Thank you. All right, guys, that's it. Another story in the books. If you have any feedback, please let us know. Just go to @huntingstories_official on Instagram and DM us. And of course, while you're there, don't forget to follow. Now, I want to thank John for sharing his stories and his faith with us. He's one of the most passionate people I've ever met, and I love to see how hunting's actually really changed his life, and obviously for the better. Now, don't forget to follow him on Instagram, YouTube, and of course his fitness group. You can find links to everything in the show notes, but his handle, if you want it now, is @red.beard.outdoors. Of course, while you're following and subscribing to his things, don't forget to follow and subscribe, review, comment on your preferred podcast app, Spotify, Apple, whatever it might be, so that we can make sure to share the stories with more folks. Finally, we're always looking for more storytellers. So if you, your dad, your friend, your mom, whomever has a good story, hit us up. We want to hear from every kind of hunter as long as you know how to tell a good story. Thank you again for tuning in. Now go make some stories of your own.